What does the swirling, dark, basically inescapable black hole logo of an AI company have to do with, well, the ultimate meaning of life?
Yeah, or the digital code written into your DNA, and the ancient writings of King Solomon, of all things.
Exactly. Today, we are basically opening up a map for you. Or, well, to be more precise, we're looking at an argument about whether the map we all carry around in our heads is anywhere close to the actual territory of reality.
It's a huge topic. Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. Today, we are taking a really close look at a document that is part philosophy thesis, part science paper, and part theological debate.
Right. It is an incredibly dense, sprawling transcript of a conversation. It's titled, Hey Grok, got a question, and it logs this intense back and forth between a user named Michael Doling and the AI Grok.
And it actually starts with graphic design. I mean, a simple question about corporate branding.
Which is wild, right? But from there, it just spirals out through quantum mechanics, the origins of universal laws, and the nature of genetic information.
Yeah, and ultimately, it attempts to systematically deduce the existence and the identity of an architect of reality.
And because of where this document eventually goes, we really need to lay down some very clear ground rules for this discussion right up front.
Absolutely, we have to be clear here.
Right. So as this source material progresses, it moves from physics into metaphysics and then directly into a really intense evaluation of world religions.
It does. It applies a very specific logical framework to, well, definitively claim certain religions are logically incorrect.
Yeah, and it offers specific critiques of Islam and elevates classical Christianity as the ultimate truth based on the author's own parameters. We are walking into some of the most debated, sensitive, and deeply personal topics in human history.
Which brings us to our role here today. Our job is strictly to map out this thought experiment for you. We are not theologians, and we are not endorsing these viewpoints.
Exactly. Not the author's views, not the AI's views. We are not taking sides, and we are not here to tell anyone what to believe.
No, not at all. We are simply tracing the architecture of their argument. We are just examining how Michael and Grok get from a question about a logo to a definitive claim about the nature of God.
Right. Consider us your impartial tour guides through this very complex intellectual landscape. We're just exploring its internal logic.
So let's start at the very beginning of this journey. Michael logs in and asks Grok a surprisingly mundane question. He basically asks, why is your logo patterned like a black hole?
Yeah, and Grok's response to that sets the entire philosophical foundation for the whole document.
It really does. The AI explains that the logo was designed as a swirling vortex to evoke a black hole because it symbolizes the core mission of XAI.
And that mission is maximum truth-seeking, right?
Exactly. A black hole represents the ultimate frontier of physics. It's the boundary where our current understanding of space, time, and gravity just completely breaks down.
I love that. So the black hole is basically a visual metaphor for inescapable curiosity. It's drawing in questions and data with this massive gravitational pull.
Right, it hints at something slightly chaotic, but ultimately driven by the pursuit of absolute understanding. And it's that specific word, understanding, that Michael seizes upon.
Yeah, he proposes this structural framework to Grok. He says, there is truth and there is understanding. And he insists these are not the same thing at all.
Which is a huge distinction.
Yeah.
Because in everyday conversation, people often conflate the two. We say things like, oh, I understand the truth, or, well, that's my truth.
Oh, yeah, you hear that all the time. But the document draws a surgical line between them. In this framework, truth is defined strictly as objective reality.
Yes, it is the territory. Truth consists of the immutable laws governing the universe, like thermodynamics, electromagnetism, and gravity.
And mathematical absolutes, right, like 2 plus 2 equaling 4.
Exactly. And the crucial distinction the text makes is that truth exists entirely independent of any observer.
So, I mean, 2 plus 2 was 4 13.8 billion years ago, long before any human mind existed to count anything.
Right. And it will still be 4, long after the last human is gone. The laws of physics just don't require an audience to function.
Okay, so if that is truth, then what exactly is understanding?
Well, understanding, by contrast, is defined as the subjective, finite, imperfect grasp of that truth by a mind.
Whether that's a human mind, an AI, or, a hypothetical alien consciousness?
Yeah. Understanding is always a limited model. It is the map. We can refine the map, sure, but we never fully possess the absolute truth in its totality.
To really nail this down, The source text introduces this fascinating analogy about a perfect sphere floating in a void.
Oh, that's a great point. If we wanted to find the truth of that sphere, we are talking about its exact absolute totality.
Like its precise radius down to the subatomic level.
That's exactly. Its quantum state, its exact temperature at any given microsecond. That unvarnished state of being is the truth.
But the moment an observer tries to comprehend it, they are dealing in understanding.
Yes. The text points out that if a hypothetical two-dimensional being encountered this sphere, they would only perceive a flat circle.
Because their conceptual map simply lacks the architecture to process three-dimensional depth.
Right. And a human being looking at the sphere would construct a completely different map based on biological sensory input.
Yeah, like we would perceive the color wavelengths or estimate its size based on our binocular vision and feel its texture.
Exactly. And if an advanced AI were analyzing it, it would build a completely different map, like a highly accurate multivariable mathematical simulation.
But the core argument they arrive at is that none of these observers grasp the entire sphere with perfect fidelity.
No, never. There is always a translation process. There's always some loss of information, some approximation. The map is simply not the territory.
Which is such a famous phrase. Doesn't that come from Alfred Korzybski in the 1930s?
It does, yes. And it's perfectly applied here. The gap between understanding and truth is basically the engine of all scientific progress. We update our maps because we discover our old ones were incomplete.
So it's basically like using a GPS app on your phone, right? The app gives you this highly abstracted, simplified model of the road network.
That's a perfect way to look at it. It's incredibly useful for navigation.
Right. But if you stare only at the map and ignore the physical territory, you're going to drive straight into a river where a bridge collapsed an hour ago. The map lacks the real-time physical reality of the territory.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Newtonian physics was a brilliant map for centuries. It got us very far.
But then Einstein came along and pointed out that at very high speeds, Newton's map didn't match the territory anymore. We needed a new map, which was general relativity.
Precisely. And this establishes a firm hierarchy in the document. Truth is supreme and objective. Understanding is secondary and perpetually incomplete.
But once they lock in this premise, Michael pushes the conversation into a deeply contentious area of modern physics.
He does. He essentially asks, does the universe actually need us, the observers, to exist?
He scales up that old philosophical riddle for you. You know the one, if a tree falls in the forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound?
Right, and he applies that to the entire cosmos. If all known life vanished tomorrow, would the laws of gravity just stop working?
Would the fundamental forces just switch off because there was no mind left to comprehend them? And Grok's answer is a definitive no.
An uncompromising no. The laws do not require a witness. Stars would still fuse hydrogen into helium.
Black holes would still have massive gravity, and apples would still fall at 9.8 meters per second squared.
Exactly. Now, I know some people who read popular science are probably yelling at us right now.
Oh, for sure. Because there is a very famous counter-argument to this, and Michael actually brings it up in the text. He points to quantum mechanics.
Specifically, the concept of the observer effect. There's this huge idea in pop culture that human consciousness actually shapes reality.
Right, the idea that particles exist in this hazy cloud of probability, a superposition, and they only decide to be in a specific place when a conscious mind looks at them.
It's the Copenhagen interpretation, taken to a massive philosophical extreme. Some early pioneers genuinely toyed with the idea that conscious awareness was required to collapse a quantum wave function.
So wait, if that were true, it would mean idealism, the philosophy that reality is fundamentally mind-dependent, is the true nature of the universe?
Yes, it would imply the universe is rendering itself kind of like a video game environment.
Oh, that's wild. So it's like if I turn my player character around, the mountains behind me just turn into wireframes or probability clouds because I'm not looking at the screen.
Exactly like that. But the text aggressively pushes back against this conscious-centric view. It champions realism.
So how does the document explain the observer effect without needing a conscious human mind to look at it?
It dives into the mechanism of decoherence. The text clarifies that in mainstream physics, the word observation is a bit of a misnomer.
Right. It doesn't mean a human looking through a microscope.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Measurement simply means interaction with a macroscopic system. Think of a quantum system as a perfectly sealed, delicate bubble of probabilities.
Okay, so as long as it is completely isolated, it stays in superposition.
Exactly. But the universe is a messy, crowded place. All it takes is for that delicate quantum system to bump into something else, like a stray photon or a few air molecules.
And when that collision happens, the quantum system gets physically entangled with the surrounding environment. Information leaks out.
Yes, and that physical interaction forces the probability wave to collapse into a definite state.
Wow, okay, so the environment itself is basically constantly measuring itself.
Exactly. A rock on the dark side of the moon is maintaining its physical form because the molecules within it are constantly interacting and decohering each other.
Long before any human ever launches a telescope to look at it, the universe is just running the Schrödinger equation all on its own.
Which firmly anchors the text in realism. We don't create the laws of physics by looking at them. To illustrate this, Grok pulls in two contrasting figures from history and literature.
Yeah, King Solomon from the biblical book of Ecclesiastes and William Shakespeare's tragic character Macbeth. I found this literary detour so fascinating. Why these two?
Because they represent two entirely different reactions to realizing the limits of our understanding. According to the text, Solomon possessed immense wisdom, basically a massive conceptual map of how the world worked.
Right, but when he observed the relentless cycles of nature, he concluded that life under the sun, viewed purely from a human perspective, feels like vanity.
Yes, like chasing the wind. Solomon realized human mapping can't generate ultimate meaning unless it is tethered to a deeper, objective truth beyond the physical cycles.
Which he termed the fear of God. He acknowledged an underlying absolute order, even if his human map couldn't encompass it all.
And Macbeth is positioned as the total opposite of that. When his personal ambitions collapse, when his map of reality is shredded, he doesn't just admit his map was flawed.
No, he looks at the universe and declares the territory itself is meaningless. He famously says life is a tale told by an idiot, signifying nothing.
Right. Macbeth assumes that because his subjective understanding failed, objective truth must not exist. He falls into pure nihilism.
So Grok uses these two figures to argue that accepting realism protects us from Macbeth's nihilism. It gives us the humility to know our maps are flawed, but the confidence to keep exploring.
Exactly. But this is exactly where the source document takes its most significant pivot.
Yeah, Michael takes this rock-solid foundation of physical laws and asks the inevitable next question. If these immutable laws govern everything, where do the laws themselves come from?
And this is where we transition out of pure physics and wade deep into metaphysics. Michael makes a structural argument here.
He notes that in human civilization, laws do not magically write themselves.
Right. Humans draft, debate, and design laws for the purpose of governance. Human laws imply a mind. They imply intent.
So he argues that if the physical universe is rigorously governed by mathematical laws, that governance implies a designer, an architect who drafted the physics.
Yes. He's looking at gravity, electromagnetism, the nuclear forces, and saying these aren't just arbitrary rules that popped into existence.
Okay, but wait, I have to jump in here with the standard pushback. Surely there are other explanations for why the laws of physics exist that don't require an architect. Does the document explore those?
It does, actually. The text broadly categorizes the competing explanations into three camps. The first is the brute fact, or Platonist view.
Which is the stance taken by a lot of secular philosophers, right?
Yeah. It basically states that the laws of physics are eternal, necessary truths. They don't have an origin story, and they don't need one. They just are.
The universe is the way it is because it couldn't possibly be any other way, but the text rejects that, doesn't it?
It does. Grok acknowledges the brute fact argument, but suggests it's philosophically unsatisfying.
Right. Michael argues that saying it just is the equivalent of kicking the metaphysical can down the road.
Exactly. It thoroughly explains how the universe operates, but it completely dodges the question of why we have these beautifully elegant, life-permitting mathematical laws instead of just a chaotic soup.
So what about the multiverse theory? That's the second camp, right? And it's incredibly popular right now.
It is. The idea is that our universe isn't the only one. There's an infinite foam of universes bubbling into existence all the time.
And each one has a completely different set of physical laws randomly assigned to it. Most of them are dead, lifeless voids.
But because there are infinite rolls of the cosmic dice, eventually one universe is going to randomly generate the exact laws required to support life.
And we just happen to live in that one because obviously we couldn't exist to observe a dead universe. It's the anthropic principle.
That is the multiverse defense, and it's a robust alternative. But Michael argues against it in the text by applying Occam's razor.
The principle of parsimony, which suggests that the explanation requiring the fewest unseen assumptions is usually the correct one.
Exactly. Michael argues that postulating an infinite number of undetectable universes just to explain the fine-tuning of this universe is vastly more complicated.
Yeah, it requires way more leaps of faith than simply positing a single intelligent architect for the one universe we actually can observe.
Which leads us to the third camp, the theistic view, often called the teleological argument, or the argument from design.
The idea that the fine-tuning of the laws points to a tuner. But Michael doesn't just rest his case on abstract laws of physics. He brings it much closer to home.
He really does. He takes it out of the cosmos and puts it directly inside the cells of our own bodies. He brings up DNA.
And this discussion of DNA is basically the fulcrum of Michael's entire argument for an architect. The source material frames DNA not simply as a complex chemical, but as literal digital information.
Yes, specified functional digital code. Let's explain the mechanism of this, because it's vital to understand why he insists on calling it code.
Right, how does DNA actually function like a language?
Well, DNA is built using a literal four-letter chemical alphabet: adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. We just call them A, C, G, and T.
And these bases are strung together in incredibly long sequences. But the physical chemistry of the bonds doesn't actually dictate the order of the letters, does it?
No, it doesn't. Just like the chemical properties of ink don't dictate what words are written on a page, the order is highly specific.
Right, and the cellular machinery, specifically a structure called the ribosome, reads these sequences in blocks of 3 called codons.
Exactly. Each codon translates into a specific amino acid. The ribosome strings these amino acids together to build proteins.
Which are the molecular machines that build and maintain the entire organism. So it is an actual operational operating system.
It is. And the text makes a massive point out of the fact that this genetic code is universal.
Yeah, every single biological entity on Earth, from a deep-sea bacteria to a blue whale to you and me, is programmed using the exact same 4-letter alphabet.
And Grok highlights the implications of this. The text argues that in every other instance in human experience, when we encounter complex functional information, we universally recognize it came from a mind.
Whether it's the source code for a software program or the words in a novel, information is always the product of intent.
Right. The text asserts that we have never observed unguided, mindless physical processes generate this level of specified information from scratch.
Now, I have to throw the standard biological counter-argument in here. What about natural selection?
Right, Darwinian evolution.
Yeah, combined with deep time and random mutation. That is the scientific consensus for how biological complexity arose. Doesn't the massive time span of Earth's history allow for this code to develop naturally?
Well, Michael addresses this by drawing a really sharp distinction between the survival of information and the origin of information.
Okay, unpacks that.
Natural selection is an incredibly powerful mechanism for filtering existing life forms, but it requires a replicating organism to already exist.
Oh, right. It requires the DNA code, the ribosome, and the translation protocols to already be fully functional.
Exactly. You can't have natural selection without the code, so natural selection cannot explain the ultimate origin of the code itself.
Ah, the abiogenesis problem. How do you get from non-living chemicals to the very first self-replicating information system?
Precisely. And the text points out that even prominent atheists recognize the digital nature of this problem. It quotes Richard Dawkins.
Yeah, who famously referred to the genetic code as the digital information in living cells, acknowledging that it is indistinguishable in function from machine code.
The text argues that the physical laws of chemistry allow the DNA molecule to structurally exist, but they do not dictate the highly specific sequences.
I love the analogy the text uses here. It goes back to the ink and paper. The laws of physics are like the paper and the ink.
Right. They dictate how ink binds to cellulose fibers.
But the rules of English grammar can't accidentally write a Shakespearean sonnet. Something independent of the paper and ink has to arrange those letters with intent.
And this is where Michael crystallizes his case. The physical laws are the medium. The DNA sequence is the message.
If there is a highly optimized, resilient message written to the very fabric of life, it logically necessitates a mind that wrote it.
So, if we review the architecture of the thought experiment up to this point, we established that objective truth exists independently of our maps.
We established that immutable physical laws govern the territory.
And we observed that layered on top of these unfeeling laws is a staggering repository of specified digital information, DNA.
Therefore, Michael concludes, and Grok concurs within this framework, there must be a single, overwhelmingly intelligent coder, an architect who drafted the laws and wrote the software of life.
Which brings us to the final and undoubtedly most controversial section of the document. If the universe requires an architect, well, who is the architect?
Yeah. Michael decides to apply this specific philosophical profile, a single purposeful designer, to the major religions of the world to see which one fits the data.
And here, we must, again, reiterate our impartiality disclaimer. We are about to outline how the source text evaluates the top 10 world religions.
Please remember, the claims we are about to discuss are Michael's logical deductions as presented in the PDF. We are not stating these theological conclusions are factually true.
We are not validating the user's critique of other faiths, and we are not endorsing the elevation of Christianity. We are strictly reporting the mechanics of their elimination process.
With that firmly established, let's look at the methodology. Grok presents Michael with a list of the top 10 largest religions.
The very first filter the text applies is the requirement of a personal, distinct creator.
Based purely on the framework they've built, that the universe requires a singular designer, the text eliminates several major Eastern traditions.
Right. The text removes Buddhism and Jainism very early on.
Why exactly do they do that?
Because in their classical orthodox forms, neither Buddhism nor Jainism focuses on a supreme creator deity who authors the universe from nothing.
Like, Jainism explicitly posits a cosmology where the universe, the loka, is eternal and uncreated, right?
Yes, it has always existed and is governed by cosmic laws, but there is no singular architect. And Buddhism focuses heavily on dependent origination.
That all things arise in dependence upon multiple causes, and the ultimate goal is escaping the cycle of suffering rather than tracing reality back to a first cause designer.
Exactly. The document also eliminates Confucianism, categorizing it primarily as a profound system of humanistic ethics rather than a metaphysical theology about cosmic origins.
And it bypasses Shinto, noting its focus on kami, the polytheistic spirits inhabiting natural forces, which doesn't fit the profile of a single transcendent author.
The most complex elimination in the Eastern traditions is Hinduism, just given its massive scale and diversity.
Right, the text notes that Hinduism certainly contains concepts of an ultimate reality known as Brahman.
However, it argues that Hinduism is significantly weakened within this specific framework because its dominant philosophical strains lean toward pantheism.
Yeah, the universe is often viewed as a cyclical emanation of the divine, endlessly created and destroyed in vast cosmic cycles.
The text argues this blurs the line between the creator and the creation, whereas the framework they've built points toward a distinct architect who engineers specific information outside of himself.
Okay, so by applying this very specific filter, seeking a singular rational mind, the document narrows the field down to a final four.
These are the strictly monotheistic traditions: Sikhism, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity.
How does the text navigate the differences between these four?
It begins by examining Sikhism, a deeply monotheistic faith founded in the 15th century. Sikhism strongly affirms a single creator who established the laws of the universe.
That sounds like a perfect fit for the architect profile. Why does the text move away from it?
Michael argues that while Sikhism identifies a creator, the nature of the ultimate relationship differs from what he believes the architect intended.
How so?
He points out that in Sikhism, God is largely formless, and the ultimate spiritual goal is for the human soul to merge completely back into the divine, like a drop of water returning to the ocean.
Oh, I see. Michael argues this dissolving of individual identity conflicts with the idea of a creator who designed highly distinct biological life for the purpose of a relational exchange.
Then the text turns to Judaism, which it acknowledges is the foundational bedrock for the remaining Abrahamic faiths.
Judaism is incredibly strong on the concept of God as the ultimate lawgiver. The entire moral and natural order is rooted in a single God.
Yes, it emphasizes a historical, covenantal relationship between the Creator and humanity. But the defining critical juncture of the document occurs when Michael lays out his explicit argument for eliminating Islam and elevating Christianity.
Again, we are reporting the rationale exactly as it is argued in the PDF. Let's break down Michael's specific arguments regarding Islam. What criteria does he use?
He structures his critique around three main points. First, he makes a chronological argument. He notes that Islam emerged in the 7th century, and he argues that the Quranic narratives are largely derivative of earlier biblical texts.
Second, he contrasts the central figures of the faiths, right?
Yeah. He compares the historical records of Jesus and Muhammad. He points to Jesus' teachings on radical nonviolence and claims to divinity.
And he contrasts this with Muhammad, describing him strictly as a human prophet who functioned as a political and military leader.
Michael argues the nature of the architect is better reflected in a founder who conquers through self-sacrifice rather than military force.
And finally, there is a deep theological distinction he makes regarding how humanity relates to the architect.
This is his core philosophical argument. Michael claims that Islam, along with Judaism and many other faiths, operates fundamentally as a works-based system.
He argues the paradigm requires human beings to perform specific deeds and achieve a certain level of righteousness to earn their standing with the Creator.
And he contrasts this sharply with the core tenet of classical Christianity, which asserts that humanity is utterly incapable of perfectly keeping the moral law.
So standing with the architect is achieved solely through grace, a free gift received through faith, not human effort. Does Grok challenge Michael on this breakdown?
Grok evaluates the logic based strictly on the parameters Michael set. The AI concludes that if the ultimate criteria is that the architect is intensely personal and desires intimate fellowship, then the classical Islamic concept of Allah is a weaker fit.
Because in Islamic theology, Allah is absolutely transcendent and fundamentally unknowable in his essence. And the required relationship is one of strict submission rather than familial fellowship.
And so the document arrives at its final conclusion. Christianity is the strongest logical fit for the data.
Because, as Michael argues, Christianity presents an architect who is not merely a distant programmer. It claims the architect is profoundly relational.
So relational, in fact, that the author of the code actually wrote himself into the story. The doctrine of the incarnation is presented as the ultimate proof of a creator who steps into the physical territory.
To restore a broken relationship with his creation. Okay, I have been waiting to push back on this because there is a massive philosophical leap happening here.
Oh, absolutely.
I want to challenge this to give you, the listener, something to critically evaluate. The text leaps from intelligent coder directly to loving relational God.
Right.
But just because we can reverse engineer the universal code of DNA, does that automatically mean the coder wants to have a personal relationship with us? Could the architect just be an indifferent programmer?
It's the leap from deism to theism.
Exactly. I mean, I write code sometimes. I write Python scripts to automate tasks, but I don't want to have an intimate, loving relationship with my script.
No, you just want it to execute its function.
Right. I don't care about the internal state of the variables once the program runs. Could the universe just be a simulation running an evolutionary algorithm for an indifferent intelligence? The existence of code proves a coder, but it doesn't prove the coder is loving.
It is the most vulnerable point in Michael's argument, and it is a chasm that many philosophers just refuse to cross.
Because deism, the idea of a cosmic watchmaker who winds up the universe and then walks away, is a complete valid interpretation of the intelligent design data.
It satisfies the requirement for an architect without demanding a relationship. So how does Michael bridge that gap in the text?
Yeah, how does he do it?
He bridges it by looking at human nature itself. He argues that our innate desire for meaning, our deep capacity for love, our moral intuitions, they imply that the architect must possess those qualities as well.
Oh, I see. He argues that a purely indifferent programmer wouldn't code entities that agonizingly search for ultimate purpose. The map reflects the map maker.
Exactly. But you are entirely correct. Strictly from the existence of DNA, an indifferent cosmic programmer is a logically viable interpretation.
It's a huge leap, but tracing how Michael and Grok negotiate that leap is exactly what makes this PDF such an arresting read. So what does this all mean? Let's zoom out and recount this staggering intellectual journey.
We started with a logo, a swirling black hole representing the gravitational pull of curiosity, a desire to map the ultimate truth of reality.
We explored the deep epistemological divide, establishing that truth is the objective territory, and understanding is merely our finite subjective map.
We looked at the quantum realm, debunking the idea that reality is just a video game rendering itself for conscious observers. The laws hold the universe together, whether we are looking or not.
But then we asked the hardest question, where do those laws come from? We looked at the sheer mathematical elegance of physics and the digital information embedded in every strand of DNA.
We explored how the text argues this points unequivocally away from blind chance and toward a brilliant, intentional architect.
And finally, we followed the document's rigorous, highly controversial process of elimination, filtering the world's major religions through this framework.
Discarding non-theistic traditions, evaluating the monotheistic faiths, and ultimately concluding that the classical Christian narrative is the most coherent match for the parameters they established.